Bravo!
elbow resting on the table and her head leaning on that hand, sat the strangest lady I have ever seen or shall ever see. She was dressed in rich materials, satins and lace and silks, all of white. Her shoes were white, and she had a long white veil that pended from her hair, and she had bridal flowers in her hair, but her hair was white. Some bright jewels sparkled on her neck and on her hands, and some other jewels lay sparkling on the table. Dresses, less splendid than the dress she wore, and half-packed trunks were scattered about. She had not quite finished dressing, for she had but one shoe on. The other was on the table near her hand. Her veil was but half arranged, her watch and chain were not put on, and some lace for her bosom lay with those trinkets, and with her handkerchief and gloves and some flowers and a prayer book, all confusedly heaped about the looking-glass. Once I had been taken to one of our old marsh churches to see a skeleton in the ashes of a rich dress that had been dug out of a vault under the church pavement. Now, waxwork and skeleton seemed to have dark eyes that moved and looked at me. I should have cried out if I could. "Who is it?" said the lady at the table. "Pip, ma'am." "Pip?" "Mr. Pumblechook's boy, ma'am. Come to play." "Come nearer. Let me look at you. Come close." It was when I stood before her, avoiding her eyes, that I took note of the surrounding objects in detail, and saw that her watch had stopped at 20 minutes to 9, and that a clock in the room had stopped at 20 minutes to 9. "Look at me," said Miss Havisham. "You're not afraid of a woman who has never seen the sun since you were born?" I regret to state that I was not afraid of telling the enormous light comprehended in the answer. "No." "Do you know what's Dutch here?" she said, laying her hands one upon the other on her left side. "Yes, ma'am. It made me think of the young man." "What do I touch?" "Your heart. Broken!" She uttered the word with an eager look, and with strong emphasis, and with a weird smile that had a kind of boast in it. Afterwards, she kept her hands there for a little while, and slowly took them away as if they were heavy. "I'm tired," said Miss Havisham. "I want diversion, and I have done with man and woman. Play." I think it will be conceded by most disputatious reader that she could hardly have directed an unfortunate boy to do anything in the wide world more difficult to be done under the circumstances. "I sometimes have sick fancies," she went on, "and have a sick fancy that I want to see some play. There, there!" With an impatient movement of the finger of her right hand. "Play!"
They arrived in due time at the place of destination, and as soon as the string of carriages before them would allow, alighted, ascended the stairs, heard their names announced from one landing place to another in audible voice, and entered their room splendidly lit up, quite full of company, and insufferably hot. When they had paid their tribute of politeness by curtsying to the lady of the house, they were permitted to mingle in the crowd and take their share of heat and inconvenience, to which their arrival must necessarily add. After some time spent in saying little or doing less, Lady Middleton sat down to casino, and as Marianne was not in spirits for moving about, she and Elinor, luckily succeeding to chairs, placed themselves at no great distance from the table. They had not remained in this manner long before Elinor perceived Willoughby standing within a few yards of them in earnest conversation with a very fashionable-looking young woman. She soon caught his eyes, and he immediately bowed, but without attempting to speak to her or approach Marian, though he could not but see her, and then continued his discourse with the same lady. Elinor turned involuntarily to Marianne to see whether he could be unobserved by her. At the moment she first perceived him, and her whole countenance glowing with sudden delight, she would have moved towards him instantly, had not her sister caught hold of her. "Good heavens!" she exclaimed. "He's there! He's there! Oh, why does he not look at me? Why cannot I speak to him?" Pray to be composed," cried Elinor, "and do not betray what you feel to everybody present. Perhaps he has not observed you yet." This, however, was more than she could believe herself. and to be composed as such was not only beyond the reach of Marianne, it was beyond her wish. She said in agony of impatience which affected every feature. At least he turned around again and regarded them both. She stared up and, pronouncing his name in a tone of affection, held out her hand to him. He approached, and addressing himself rather to Elinor than Marianne, as if wishing to avoid her eye, and determined not to observe her attitude, inquired in a hurried manner after Mrs. Dashwood, and asked how long they had been in town. Elinor was robbed of all presence of mind by such an address, and was unable to say a word. But the feelings of her sister were instantly expressed. Her face was crimson over, and she exclaimed in a voice of the greatest emotion, "Good God, Willoughby, what is the meaning of this? Have you not received my letters? Will you not shake hands with me?" He could not then avoid it, but her touch seemed painful to him, and he held her hand only for a moment. During all this time he was evidently struggling for composure. Elinor watched his countenance and saw its expression become more tranquil. After a moment's pause, he spoke with calmness. "I did myself the honor of calling in Baker Street last Tuesday, and very much regretted that I was not fortunate enough to find yourselves and Mrs. Jennings at home. My card was not lost, I hope." "But have you not received my notes?" cried Marianne in the wildest anxiety. "Here is some mistake, I'm sure of some dreadful mistake. What can be the meaning of it? Tell me, Willoughby, for heaven's sake, tell me, what is the matter?" He made no reply. His complexion changed, and all his embarrassment returned, but as if on catching the eye of the young lady with whom he had been previously talking, he felt the necessity of instant exertion. He recovered himself again, and after saying, "Yes, I had the pleasure of receiving the information of your arrival in town, which you were so good to send me," turned hesitantly away with a slight bow and joined his friend.
Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Chapter 35. Soon afterwards, Biddy, Joe, and I had a cold dinner together, but we dined in the best parlor, not in the old kitchen. Joe was so excitingly particular what he did with his knife and fork, or the saucer and whatnot. There was great restraint upon us. But after dinner, when I made him take his pipe, and when I had loitered with him above the forge, and when we sat down together on the great block of stone outside it, we got on better. I noticed that after the funeral, Joe changed his clothes so far as to make a compromise between his Sunday dress and walking dress, in which dear fellow looked natural and like the man he was. He was very much pleased by my asking if I might sleep in my own little room, and I was pleased too, for I felt that I had done rather a great thing in making the request. When the shadows of evening were closing in, I took an opportunity of getting into the garden with Biddy for a little talk. "Biddy," said I, "I think you might have written to me about these sad matters." "Do you, Mr. Pip?" said Biddy. "I should have written if I had thought that. Don't suppose that I mean to be unkind, Biddy. When I say I consider you, that you ought to have thought that. Do you, Mr. Pip?" She was so quiet and had such an orderly, good and pretty way with her that I did not like the thought of making her cry again. After looking a little at her downcast eyes as she walked beside me, I gave up that point. "I suppose it will be difficult for you to remain here now, Biddy dear?" "Oh, I can do so, Mr. Pip," said Biddy in a tone of regret, but still of quiet conviction. "I have been speaking to Mrs. Hubble, and I am going to her to-morrow. I hope we shall be able to take some care of Mr. Carteret together until he settles down." "How are you going to live, Biddy, if you want any more—" "How am I going to live?" repeated Biddy, striking in with a momentary flush upon her face. "I'll tell you, Mr. Pip. I'm going to try to get the place of mistress in the new school nearly finished here. I can be well recommended by all the neighbors, and I hope I can be industrious and patient, and teach myself while I teach others. You know, Mr. Pip, pursued Biddy with a smile as she raised her eyes to my face, the new schools are not like the old one, but I learned a good deal from you after that time, and have had time since then to improve. I think you would always improve, Biddy, under any circumstances. Ah, except in my bad side of human nature, murmured Biddy. It was not so much a reproach as an irresistible thinking aloud. Well, I thought I would give up that point too, so I walked a little further with Biddy, looking silently at her downcast eyes.
The dinner was a grand one, the servants were numerous, and everything bespoke the mistress's inclination for show, and the master's ability to support it. In spite of the improvements and additions which were making to the Norland estate, and in spite of its owner having once been within some £1,000 of being obliged to sell out a loss, nothing gave any symptom of that indigence which he had tried to infer from it. No poverty of any kind, except of conversation, appeared, but there the defiance was considerable. John Dashwood had not much to say for himself that was worth hearing, and his wife had still less, but there was no peculiar disgrace in this, for it was very much the case with the chief of the visitors, who almost all laboured under one or the other of these disqualifications for being agreeable: want of sense, either natural or improved, want of elegance, want of spirits, or want of temper. When the ladies withdrew from to the drawing-room after dinner, this poverty was peculiarly evident, for the gentlemen had supplied the discourse with some variety, the variety of politics, enclosing land and breaking horses. But then it was all over, and the subject only engaged the ladies till coffee came in, which was the comparative heights of Harry Dashwood and Lady Middleton's second son William, who were nearly of the same age. Had both the children been dead, the affair might have been determined too easily by measuring them at once. But as Harry was only present, it was all conjectural assertion on both sides, and everybody had a right to be equally positive in their opinion, and to repeat it over and over again as often so as they liked. The party stood thus: the two mothers, though each really convinced that her own son was the tallest, politely decided in favor of the other, and two grandmothers, with not less partially, but more sincerity, were equally earnest in support of their own descendant. Lucy, who was hardly less anxious to please one parent than the other, though the boys were both remarkably tall for their age, and could not conceive that there could be the smallest difference in the world between them, and Miss Steele, with yet greater address, gave it, as fast as she could, in favour of each. Elinor, having once delivered her opinion on William's side, by which she offended Mrs. Ferrars and Fanny still more, did not see the necessity by enforcing it by any farther ascension. And Marianne, when called on for hers, offended them all, by declaring that she had no opinion to give, as she had never thought about it. Before her removing from Norland, Elinor had painted a very pretty pair of screens for her sister-in-law, which being now just mounted and brought home, ornamented her present drawing-room, and these screens, catching the eye of John Dashwood on his following the other gentlemen into the room, were officiously handed by him to Colonel Brandon for his admiration. "These are done by my eldest sister," said he, "and you, as a man of taste, will, I dare say, be pleased with them. I do not know whether you have ever happened to see any of her performances before, but she is in general reckoned to draw extremely well."
arose the next morning with recovered spirits and happy looks. The disappointment of the evening before seemed forgotten in the expectation of what was to happen that day. They had not long finished their breakfast before Mrs. Palmer's brewery stopped at the door, and in a few minutes she came laughing into the room, so delighted to see them all that it was hard to say whether she received most pleasure from meeting her mother or the Miss Dashwoods again. So surprised at their coming to town, though it was what she had rather expected all along, so angry at their accepting her mother's invitation after having declined her own, though at the same time she would have never forgiven them if they had not come. "Mr. Palmer will be so happy to see you," said she. "What do you think he said when he heard of your coming with Mamma?" I forget what it was now, but it was something so droll. After an hour or two spent in what her mother called comfortable chat, or, in other words, in every variety of inquiry concerning all their acquaintance on Mrs. Jennings' side, and in laughter without cause on Mrs. Palmer's side, it was proposed by the latter that they should all accompany her to some shops where she had business that morning, to which Mrs. Jennings and Elinor readily consented, as having likewise some purchases to make themselves. And Marian, though declining it at first, was induced to go likewise. Wherever they went, she was evidently always on the watch. In Bond Street especially, where much of their business lay, her eyes were in constant inquiry, and in whatever shop the party were engaged, her mind was equally abstracted from everything actually before them, from all that interested and occupied the others. Restless and dissatisfied everywhere, her sister could never obtain her opinion of any article of purchase, however it might equally concern them both. She received no pleasure from anything, was only impatient to be at home again, and could with difficulty govern her vexation at the tediousness of Mrs. Palmer, whose eyes were caught by everything pretty, expensive, or new, who was wild to buy all, could determine on none, and dawdled away her time in rapture and indecision. It was late in the morning before they returned home, and no sooner had they entered the house than Marian flew eagerly upstairs, and when Elinor followed, she found her turning from the table with a sorrowful countenance, which declared that no Willoughby had been there. "Has no letter been left for me since we went out?" said she to the footman, who then entered with the parcels. She was answered in the negative. "Are you quite sure of it?" she replied. "Are you certain that no servant, no porter has left any letter or note?" The man replied none had. "How very odd," said she, in a low, disappointed voice, as she turned away to the window. "How odd, indeed," repeated Elinor within herself, regarding her sister with uneasiness. If she had not known him to be in town, she would have not written to him, as she did. She would have written to Combe Magna. And if he is in town, how odd that he should neither come nor write. Oh, my dear mother, you must be wrong in permitting an engagement between your daughter so young, a man so little known, to be carried on in so doubtful, so mysterious a manner. I long to inquire, and how will my interference be borne?"
Edward has been staying several weeks in the house before he engaged much of Mrs. Dashwood's attention, for she was, at that time, in such affliction as rendered her careless of surrounding objects. She saw only that he was quiet and unobtrusive, and she liked him for it. He did not disturb the restlessness of her mind by an ill-timed conversation. She was first called to observe on approving father by a reflection which Elinor chanced one day to make on the difference between him and his sister. It was a contrast which recommended him most forcibly to her mother. "It is enough," said she. "To say that he is unlike Fanny is enough. It implies everything amiable. I love him already." "I think you like him," said Elinor, "when you know more of him." "Like him!" replied her mother with a smile. "I feel no sentiment of approbation inferior to love. You may esteem him. I have never yet known what it was to separate esteem and love." Mrs. Dashwood now took pains to get acquainted with him. Her manners were attaching, and soon banished his reserve. She speedily comprehended all his merits. The persuasion of his regard for Elinor perhaps assisted her penetration, but she really felt assured of his worth, and even the quietness of manner, which militated against all her established ideas of what a young man's address ought to be,
was no longer uninteresting when she knew his heart to be warm and his temper affectionate. No sooner did she perceive any symptom of love in his behavior to Elinor than she considered their serious attachment as certain, and looked forward to their marriages rapidly approaching. "In a few months, my dear Marianne," said she, "Elinor will, in all probability, be settled for life. We shall miss her, but she will be happy. Oh, mamma, how shall we do without her? My love, it will be certainly a separation. We shall live within a few miles of each other, and shall meet every day of our lives. You will gain a brother, a real, affectionate brother. I have the highest opinion in the world of Edward's heart. But you look grave, Marianne. Do you disapprove of your sister's choice?" "Perhaps," said Marianne, "I may consider it with some surprise. Edward is very amiable, and I love him tenderly, but yet he is not the kind of young man. There is something wanting. His figure is not striking. It has none of that grace which I should expect in a man who could seriously attach my sister. His eyes want all that spirit, that fire, which at once announce virtue and intelligence. And besides all this, I am afraid, mamma, he has no real taste. Music seems certainly to attract him, and though he admires Elinor's drawing very much, it is not the admiration of a person who can understand their worth. It is evident, in spite of his frequent attention to her while she draws, that in fact he knows nothing of the matter. He admires as a lover, not as a connoisseur. To satisfy me, those characters must be united. I could not be happy with a man whose taste did not in every point coincide with my own. He must enter into all my feelings. The same books, the same music must charm us both. Oh, mamma, how spiritless, how tame was Edward's manner in reading to us last night. I felt for my sister most severely, yet she bore it with so much composure. She seemed sorely to notice it. I could hardly keep my seat to hear those beautiful lines, which have frequently almost driven me wild, pronounced with such impenetrable calmness, such dreadful indifference.
Rochester, for God's sake, come! A chamber door opened. Someone ran or rushed along the gallery. Another step stamped on the flooring above, and something fell. And there was silence. I had put on some clothes, though horror shook all my limbs. I issued from my apartment. The sleepers were all aroused. Terrified murmurs sounded in every room. Door after door unclosed. One looked out, and another looked out. The gallery filled. Gentlemen and ladies alike had quitted their beds, and "Oh, what is it? Who is hurt? What has happened? Fetch a light! Is it fire? Are there robbers? Where shall we run?" was demanded confusedly on all hands. But for the moonlight they would have been in complete darkness. They ran to and fro, they crowded together, some sobbed, some stambled, the confusion was inextricable. "Where the devil is Rochester?" cried Colonel Dent. "I cannot find him in his bed." "Here, here," was shouted in return. "Be composed, all of you, I'm coming." And the door at the end of the gallery opened, and Mr. Rochester advanced with a candle. He had just descended from the upper story. One of the ladies ran to him directly. She seized his arm. It was Miss Ingram. "What awful event has taken place?" said she. "Speak, let us know the worst at once." "But don't pull me down or strangle me," he replied, for the Misses Ashton were clinging about him now, and the two dowagers in vast white wrappers were bearing down on him like ships in full sail. All's right," he cried. "It's a mere rehearsal of Machado about nothing. Ladies, keep off, or I shall wax dangerous." And dangerous he looked, his black eyes darted sparks. Calming himself by an effort, he added, "A servant has had a nightmare, that is all. She's an excitable, nervous person. She construed her dream into an apparition or something of that sort, no doubt, and has taken a fit with fright. Now, then, I must see you all back into your rooms, for till the house is settled, she cannot be looked after. Gentlemen, have the goodness to set the ladies the example. Miss Ingram, I'm sure you will not fail in evincing superiority to idle terrors. Amy and Louisa, return to your nets like a pair of doves, as you are. Miss Dames, you will take hold to that certainty if you stay in this chill gallery any longer. And so, by dint of alternate coaxing and commanding, he contrived to get them all once more enclosed in their separate dormitories. I did not wait to be ordered back to mine, but retreated unnoticed, as unnoticed I had left it. Not, however, to go to bed. On the contrary, I began and dressed myself carefully. The sounds I had heard after the scream, and the words that had been uttered, had probably been heard only by me, for they had proceeded from the room above mine. But they assured me that it was not a servant's dream which had thus struck horror through the house, and that the explanation Mr. Rochester had given was merely an invention framed to pacify his guests.
Mr. Rochester must have been aware of the entrance of Mrs. Fairfax and myself, but it appeared he was not in the mood to notice us, for he never lifted his head as we approached. "Here is Miss Eyre, sir," said Mrs. Fairfax in her quiet way. He bowed, still not taking his eyes from the group of the dog and child. "Let Miss Eyre be seated," said he, and there was something in the forced stiff bow, in the impatient yet formal tone, which seemed further to express, "What the deuce is it to me whether Miss Eyre be there or not? At this moment I am not disposed to accost her." I sat down, quite disembarrassed. A reception of finished politeness would probably have confused me. I could not have returned or repaid it by answering grace and elegance on my part. But harsh caprice laid me under no obligation. On the contrary, a decent quiescence, under the freak of manner, gave me the advantage. Besides, the eccentricity of the proceeding was piquant. I felt interested to see how he would go on. He went on as a statue would, that is, he neither spoke or moved. Mrs. Fairfax seemed to think it necessary that someone should be amiable, and she began to talk. Kindly, as usual, and as usual, rather tried, she condoled with him on the pressure of business he had had all day, on the annoyance it must have been to him with that painful sprain. Then she commended his patience and perseverance in going through with it. "Madam, I should like some tea," was the sole rejoinder she got. She hastened to ring the bell, and when the tray came, she proceeded to arrange the cups, spoon, with assiduous celerity. I and Adele went to the table, but the master did not leave his couch. "Will you hand Mr. Rochester's cup?" said Mrs. Fairfax to me. "Adele might perhaps spill it." I did as requested. As he took the cup from my hand, Adele, thinking the moment propitious for making a request in my favour, cried out, "N'est-ce pas, monsieur, qu'il y a un cadeau pour Mademoiselle Eyre dans votre petit coffret?" "Who talks of cadeau?" said he gruffly. "Did you expect a present, Miss Eyre? Are you fond of presents?" And he searched my face with eyes that I saw were dark, irate, and piercing. "I hardly know, sir. I have little experience of them. They are generally though pleasant things." "Generally though? But what do you think?" "I should be obligated to take time, sir, before I could give you an answer worthy of your acceptance. A present has many faces to it, has it not? And one should consider all before pronouncing an opinion as to its nature. Miss Eyre, you are not as unsophisticated as Adele. She demands a cadeau glamorously. The moment she sees me, you beat about the bush."
There was no possibility of taking a walk that day. We had been wandering, indeed, in the leafless shrubbery and now in the morning, but since dinner, Mrs. Reed, when there was no company, dined early. The cold winter wind has brought with it clouds so somber and a rain so penetrating that further outdoor exercise was now out of the question. I was glad of it. I never liked long walks, especially on chilly afternoons. Dreadful to me was the coming home in the raw twilight, with nipped fingers and toes, and a heart saddened by the chidings of Bessie, the nurse, and humbled by the consciousness of my physical inferiority to Eliza, John, and Georgiana Reed. The said Eliza, John, and Georgiana were now clustered round their mamma in the drawing-room. She lay reclined on a sofa by the fireside, and with her darlings about her, for the time neither quarrelling nor crying, looked perfectly happy. Me she had dispensed from joining the group, saying she regretted to be under the necessity of keeping me at distance, but that until she heard from Bessie, and could discover by her own observation that I was endeavouring in good earnest to acquire a more sociable and childlike disposition, a more attractive and sprightly manner, something lighter, franker, more natural as it were. She really must exclude me from privileges intended only for contented, happy little children. What does Bessie say I have done? I asked. Jane. I don't like cavillers or questioners. Besides, there is something truly forbidding in the child taking up her elders in that manner. Be seated somewhere, and until you can speak pleasantly, remain silent. A breakfast room adjoined the drawing room. I slept in there. It contained the bookcase. I soon possessed myself of a volume, taking care that it should be one stored with pictures. I mounted into the window seat. Gathering up my feet, I sat cross-legged, like a Turk, and having drawn the red moreen curtain nearly close, I was shrined in double retirement. Folds of scarlet drapery shut in my view to the right hand. To the left were the clear panes of glass, protecting but not separating me from the drear November day. At intervals, while turning over the leaves of my book, I studied the aspect of that winter afternoon. Afar, it offered a pale blank of mist and cloud, near a scene of wet lawn and stormy shrub, with ceaseless rain sweeping away wildly before a long and lamentable blast. I returned to my book, Bewick's History of British Birds. The letterpress therefore I care little for, generally speaking, and yet there were certain introductory pages that, child as I was, I could not pass quite as a blank. They were those which treat of the haunts of Seafool, of the solitary rocks and promontories, by them only inhabited, of the coast of Norway, studded with islands from its southern extremity, the Lydness Ornace to the North Cape.
My name, he said, is Jaggers, and I am a lawyer in London. I am pretty well known. I have unusual business to transact with you, and I commenced by explaining that is not of my originating. If my advice had been asked, I should not have been here. It was not asked, and you see me here. What I have to do as the confidential agent of another, I do. No less, no more. Finding that he could not see us very well from where he sat, he got up and threw one leg over the back of the chair and leaned upon it, thus having one foot on the seat of the chair and one foot on the ground. Now, Joseph Gargery, I am the bearer of an offer to relieve you of this young fellow, your apprentice. You would not object to cancel his indentures, at his request and for his good. You would want nothing for so doing?
Lord forbid that I should want anything for not standing in Pip's way, said Joe, staring.
Lord forbidding is pious, but not to the purpose,
returned Mr. Jaggers.
The question is, would you want anything? Do you want anything?
The answer is, returned Joe, sternly, no. I thought Mr. Jaggers glanced at Joe, as if he considered him a fool for disinterestedness, but I was too much bewildered between breathless curiosity and surprise to be sure of it.
Very well,
said Mr. Jaggers.
Recollect the admission you have made, and don't try to go from it presently.
Who's a going to try? Retorted Joe.
I don't say anybody is. Do you keep a dog?
Yes, I do keep a dog.
Bear in mind, then, that Bragg is a good dog, but Holdfast is better. Bear that in mind, will you?
Repeated Mr. Jaggers, shutting his eyes and nodding his head at Joe, as if he were forgiving him something.
Now, I return to this young fella, and the communication I have got to make is that he has great expectations.
Joe and I gasped and looked at one another.
I am instructed to communicate to him,
said Mr. Jaggers, throwing his finger at me sideways,
that he will come into Hampshire property.
Further, that is the desire of the present possessor of that property,
that he be immediately removed from his present sphere of life and from this place, and be brought up as a gentleman, in a word, as a young fella of great expectations.
My dream was out. My wild fancy was surpassed by sour reality. Miss Havisham was going to make my fortune on a grand scale.
Now, Mr. Pip,
pursued the lawyer,
I address the rest of what I have to say to you. You are to understand, first, there is the request of the person from whom I take my instructions, that you always bear the name of Pip. You will have no objection, I dare say, to your great expectations being encumbered with that easy condition. But if you have any objection, this is the time to mention it.
My father's family name being Pirip and my Christian name Philip, my infant tongue could make of both names nothing longer or more explicit than Pip, so I called myself Pip and came to be called Pip. I give Pirip as my father's family name on the authority of his tombstone and my sister, Mrs. Joe Gargery, who married the blacksmith, as I never saw my father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for the days were long before the days of photographs. My first fancies regarding what they were like were unreasonably derived from their tombstones. The shape of the letters on my father's gave me an odd idea that he was a square, stout, dark man with curly black hair. From the character and turn of the inscription, also Georgiana, wife of the above, I drew a childish conclusion that my mother was freckled and sickly. The 5 little stone lozenges, each about a foot and a half long, which were arranged in a neat row beside the grave, and were sacred to the memory of 5 little brothers of mine, who gave up trying to get a living exceedingly early in that universal struggle. I am indebted for a belief I religiously entertained, that they had all been born on their backs with their hands in their trouser pockets, and had never taken them out in this existence. Ours was the marsh country, down by the river within, as the river wound 20 miles off the sea. My first most vivid and broad impression of the identity of things seems to me to have been gained on a memorable raw afternoon towards evening. At such a time I found out for certain that this bleak place overgrown with nettles was the churchyard, and that Philip Pirip, late of this parish, and also Georgiana, wife of the above, were dead and buried, and that Alexander, Bartholomew, Abraham, Tobias, and Roger, infant children of the aforesaid, were also dead and buried, and that the dark, flat wilderness beyond the churchyard, intersected with dikes and mounds and gates, with scattered cattle feeding on it, was the marshes, and that the low leaden line beyond was the river, and that the distant savage lair from which the wind was rushing was the sea, and that the small bundle of shivers, growing afraid of it all and beginning to cry, was Pip. "Hold your noise!" cried a terrible voice, as the men started up from among the graves at the side of the church porch. "Keep still, you little devil, or I'll cut your throat." A fearful man, all in coarse grey, with a great iron on his leg, a man with no hat and with broken shoes, and with an old rag tied around his head, a man who had been soaked in water, and smothered in mud, and lamed by stones, and cut by flints, and stung by nettles, and torn by briars, who limped and shivered and glared and growled, and whose teeth chattered in his head as he seized me by the chin. "Oh, don't cut my throat, sir," I pleaded in terror. "Pray don't do it, sir." "Tell us your name," said the man. "Quick!" "Pip, sir." "Once more," said the man, staring at me. "Give it mouth." "Pip, Pip, sir." "Show us where you live," said the man. "Point out the place." I pointed to where our village lay, on the flat inshore among the alder trees and poplars, a mile or more from the church.
Mounting to it by two broad steps and looking through, I thought I caught a glimpse of a fairy place. So bright to my novice eyes appeared the view beyond. Yet it was merely a very pretty drawing-room, and within it a boudoir, both spread with white carpets on which seemed laid brilliant garlands of flowers, both sealed with snowy mouldings of white grapes and vine leaves, beneath which glowed in rich contrast crimson couches and ottomans, while the ornaments on the pale Parian mantelpiece were of sparkling Bohemian glass, ruby red, and between the windows large mirrors repeated a general blending of snow and fire. "In what order you keep this room, Mrs. Fairfax?" said I. "No dust, no canvas coverings, except that the air feels chilly, wonderful they were inhabited daily." "Why, Miss Eyre? Though Mr. Rochester's visits here are rare, they are always sudden and unexpected, and as I observed that it put him out to find everything sewed up, and to have a bustle of arrangement on his arrival, I thought it best to keep the rooms in readiness." "Is Mr. Rochester an exacting, fastidious sort of man?" "Not particularly so, but he has a gentleman taste and habits, and he expects to have things managed in conformity to them." "Do you like him? Is he generally liked?" "Oh, yes, the family have always been respected here. Almost all the land in this neighborhood, as far as you can see, has belonged to the Rochester's time out of mind." "Well, but leaving his land out of the question, do you like him? Is he liked for himself?" "I have no cause to do otherwise than like him, and I believe he is considered a just and liberal landlord by his tenants, but he has never lived much amongst them." "But has he no peculiarities? What in short is his character?" "Oh, his character is unimpeachable, I suppose. He is rather peculiar, perhaps. He has travelled a great deal and seen a great deal of the world, I should think. I dare say he is clever, but I never had much conversation with him." "In what way is he peculiar?" "I don't know. It is not easy to describe. Nothing striking, but you feel it when he speaks to you. You cannot be always sure whether he is in jest or earnest, whether he is pleased or the contrary. You don't thoroughly understand him, in short. At least, I don't. But it is of no consequence. He is a very good master." This was all the account I got from Mrs. Fairfax of her employer and mine. There are people who seem to have no notion of sketching a character or observing and describing salient points, either in persons or things. The good lady evidently belonged to this class. My queries puzzled, but did not draw her out. Mr. Rochester was Mr. Rochester in her eyes. A gentleman, a landed proprietor, nothing more. She inquired and searched no further, and evidently wondered at my wish to gain a more definite notion of his identity.
Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Chapter 17. Afternoon arrived. Mrs. Fairfax assumed her best black satin gown, her gloves, and her gold watch, for it was her part to receive the company, to conduct the ladies to their rooms, and Adele, too, would be dressed, though I thought she had little chance of being introduced to the party that day at least. However, to please her, I allowed Sophie to apparel her in one of her short, full muslin frocks. For myself, I had no need to make any change. I should not be called upon to quit my sanctum of the schoolroom, for a sanctum it was now become to me, a very pleasant refuge in time of trouble. It had been a mild, serene spring day, one of those days which, towards the end of March or the beginning of April, rise shining over the earth as heralds of summer. It was drawing to an end now, but the evening was even warm, and I sat at work in the schoolroom with the window open. "It gets late," said Mrs. Fairfax, entering in rustling state. "I am glad I ordered dinner an hour after the time Mr. Rochester mentioned, for it is past 6 now. I have sent John down to the gates to see if there is anything on the road. One can see a long way from thence in the direction of Millcote." She went to the window. "Here he is," said she. "Well, John," leaning out, "any news?" "They're coming, ma'am," was the answer. "They'll be here in 10 minutes. Adele flew to the window. I followed, taking care to stand on one side so that, screened by the curtain, I could see without being seen. The 10 minutes John had given seemed very long, but at last wheels were heard. 4 equestrians galloped up the drive, and after them came 2 open carriages. Fluttering veils and waving plumes filled the vehicles. 2 of the cavaliers were young, dashing-looking gentlemen. The third was Mr. Rochester, on his black horse, Mesrour, pilot bounding before him. At his side rode a lady, and he and she were the first of the party. Her purple riding habit almost swept the ground. Her veil streamed long on the breeze. Mingling with its transparent folds and gleaming through them shone rich raven ringlets. "Miss Ingram!" exclaimed Mrs. Fairfax, and away she hurried to her post below. The cavalcade, following the sweep of the drive, quickly turned the angle of the house, and I lost sight of it. Adele now petitioned to go down, but I took her on my knee and gave her to understand that she must not on any account think of venturing in sight of the ladies, either now or at any other time, unless expressly sent for, that Mr. Rochester would be very angry, and some natural tears she shed on being told this, but as I began to look very grave, she consented at last to wipe them.
Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Chapter 8. For such reasons, I was very glad when 10 o'clock came and we started for Miss Havisham's, though I was not at all at my ease regarding the manner in which I should acquit myself under that lady's roof. Within a quarter of an hour we came to Miss Havisham's house, which was of old brick and dismal, and had a great many iron bars to it. Some of the windows had been walled up, of those that remained, all the lower were rustily barred. There was a courtyard in front, and that was barred. So we had to wait, after ringing the bell, until someone should come to open it. While we waited at the gate, I peeped in. Even then Mr. Pumblechook said, "And 14?" But I pretended not to hear him, and saw that at the side of the house there was a large brewery. No brewing was going on in it, and none seemed to have gone on for a long, long time. A window was raised, and a clear voice demanded, "What name?" To which my conductor replied, "Pumblechook." The voice returned, "Quite right," and the window was shut again, and a young lady came across the courtyard with keys in her hand. "This," said Mr. Pumblechook, "is Pip." "This is Pip, is it?" returned the young lady, who was very pretty and seemed very proud. "Come in, Pip." Mr. Pumblechook was coming in also, when she stopped him with the gate. "Oh," she said, "did you wish to see Miss Havisham?" "If Miss Havisham wished to see me," returned Mr. Pumblechook, discomfited. "Ah," said the girl, "but you see she don't." She said it so finally and in such an undiscussable way that Mr. Pumblechook, though in a condition of wrath dignity, could not protest. But he eyed me severely, as if I had done anything to him, and departed with the words reproachfully delivered. "Boy, let your behavior here be a credit to them which brought you up by hand." I was not free from apprehension that he would come back to propound through the gate. "And 16?" But he didn't.
My young conductress locked the gate, and we went across the courtyard. It was paved and clean, but grass was growing in every crevice. The brewery buildings had a little lane of communication with it, and the wooden gates of that lane stood open, and all the brewery beyond stood open, away to the high enclosing wall, and all was empty and disused. The cold wind seemed to blow colder there than outside the gate, and it made a shrill noise in hauling in and out at the open sides of the brewery, like the noise of wind in the rigging of a ship at sea. She saw me looking at it, and she said, "You could drink without hurt all the strong beer that's brewed there now, boy." "I should think I could, miss," said I in a shy way. "Better not try to brew beer there now, or it will turn out sour, boy. Don't you think so?" "It looks like it, miss." "Not that anybody means to try," she added, "for that's all done with, and the place will stand as idle as it is till it falls. As to strong beer, there's enough of it in the cellars already to drown the manor house."
Chapter 17. Afternoon arrived. Mrs. Fairfax assumed her best black satin gown, her gloves, and her gold watch, for it was her part to receive the company, to conduct the ladies to their rooms, etc. Adele, too, would be dressed, though I thought she had little chance of being introduced to the party that day at least. However, to please her, I allowed Sophie to apparel her in one of her short, full muslin frocks. For myself, I had no need to make any change. I should not be called upon to quit my sanctum of the schoolroom, for a sanctum it was now become to me, a very pleasant refuge in time of trouble. It had been a mild, serene spring day, one of those days which, towards the end of March or the beginning of April, rise shining over the earth as heralds of summer. It was drawing to an end now, but the evening was even warm, and I sat at work in the schoolroom with the window open. "It gets late," said Mrs. Fairfax, entering in rustling state. "I am glad I ordered dinner an hour after the time Mr. Rochester mentioned, for it is past 6 now. I have sent John down to the gates to see if there is anything on the road. One can see a long way from thence in the direction of Millcote." She went to the window. "Here he is," said she. "Well, John," leaning out, "any news?" "They're coming, ma'am," was the answer. "They'll be here in 10 minutes." Adele flew to the window. I followed, taking care to stand on one side so that, screened by the curtain, I could see without being seen. The 10 minutes John had given seemed very long, but at last wheels were heard. 4 equestrians galloped up to drive, and after them came 2 open carriages. Fluttering veils and waving plumes filled the vehicles. 2 of the cavaliers were young, dashing-looking gentlemen. The third was Mr. Rochester, on his black horse, Miss Raw, pilot bounding before him. At his side rode a lady, and he and she were the first of the party. Her purple riding habit almost swept the ground. Her veil streamed along on the breeze, mingling with its transparent folds, and gleaming through them shone rich raven ringlets. "Miss Ingram!" exclaimed Mrs. Fairfax, and away she hurried to her post below. The cavalcade, following the sweep of the drive, quickly turned the angle of the house, and I lost sight of it. Adele now petitioned to go down, but I took her on my knee, and gave her to understand that she must not, on any account, think of venturing in sight of the ladies, either now or at any other time, unless expressly sent for. That Mr. Rochester would be very angry, etc. Some natural tears she shed on being told this, but as I began to look very grave, she consented at last to wipe them.
It was near Christmas by the time all was settled. The season of general holiday approached. I now closed Martin School, taking care that the parting should not be barren on my side. Good fortune opens the hand as well as the heart wonderfully, and to give somewhat when we have largely received is but to afford a vent to the unusual ebullition of the sensations. I had long felt with pleasure that many of my rustic scholars liked me, and when we parted, that consciousness was confirmed. They manifested their affection plainly and strongly. Deep was my gratification to find I had really a place in their unsophisticated hearts. I promised them that never a week should pass in the future that I did not visit them and give them an hour's teaching in their school. Mr. Rivers came up as, having seen the classes, now numbering 60 girls, fell out before me and locked the door. I stood with the key in my hand, exchanging a few words of special farewell with some half-dozen of my best scholars, as decent, respectable, modest, and well-informed young women as could be found in the ranks of the British peasantry. And that is saying a great deal, for, after all, the British peasantry are the best taught, best mannered, most self-respecting of any in Europe. Since those days, I have seen peasants in Borneo, and the best of them seem to me ignorant, coarse, and besotted compared with my Marton girls. "Do you consider you have got your reward for a season of exertion?" asked Mr. Rivers, when they were gone. "Does not the consciousness of having done some real good in your day and generation give you pleasure?" "Doubtless. And you have only toiled a few months. Will not a life devoted to the task of regenerating a race be well spent?" "Yes," I said. "But I could not go on forever so. I want to enjoy my own faculties as well as to cultivate those of other people. I must enjoy them now. Don't recall either my mind or body to the school. I am out of it and disposed for full holiday." He looked grave. "What now? What sudden eagerness is this you advance? What are you going to do?" "To be active, as active as I can. And first, I must beg you to set Hannah at liberty and get somebody else to wait on you." "Do you want her?" "Yes, to go with me to the Moor House. Diana and Mary will be at home in a week, and I want to have everything in order against their arrival." "I understand. I thought you were for flying off for some excursion. It is better so. Shanna shall go with you. Tell her to be ready by tomorrow. Then, and here is the schoolroom key. I will give you the key of my cottage in the morning." He took it. "You give it up very gratefully," said he. "I don't quite understand your light-heartedness, because I cannot tell what employment you propose to yourself as a substitute for the one you are relinquishing. What aim, what purpose, what ambition in life have you now?"
I resisted all the way, a new thing for me, and a circumstance which greatly struck home the bad opinion Bessie and Miss Abbott were disposed to entrain of me. The fact is, I was a trifle beside myself, or rather out of myself. As the French will say, I was conscious that a moment's mutiny had already rendered me liable to strange penalties, and, like any other rebel slave, I felt resolved, in my desperation, to go all lengths. "Hold her arms, Miss Abbott, she's like a mad cat." For shame! Cried the lady's maid. "What shocking conduct, Miss Eyre, to strike a young gentleman, your benefactress son, your young master." "Master? How is he my master? Am I a servant?" "No, you are less than a servant, for you do nothing for your keep. There, sit down, and think over your weakness." They had got me by this time into the apartment indicated by Mrs. Reed, and had thrust me upon a stool. My impulse was to rise from it like a spring. Their two pair of hands arrested me instantly. "If you don't sit still, you must be tied down," said Bessie. "Miss Abbott, lend me your garters. She will break mine directly." Miss Abbott turned to devise a stowleg of the necessary ligature. This preparation for bath and additionally ignominy it inferred took a little of the excitement out of me. "Don't take them off," I cried. "I will not stir." In guarantee whereof, I attached myself to my seat by my hands. "Mind you don't," said Bessie, and when she had ascertained that I was really subsiding, she loosened her hold of me. Then she and Miss Abbott stood with folded arms, looking darkly and doubtfully on my face, as incredulous of my sanity. "She never did so before," at last said Bessie, turning to the Abigail. "But it was always in her," was the reply. "I told Mrs. Afton my opinion about the child, and Mrs. agreed with me. She's an underhand little thing. I never saw a girl of her age with so much cover." Bessie answered not, but ere long, addressing me, she said, You ought to be aware, miss, that you are under obligation to Mrs. Reed. She keeps you. If she were to turn you off, you will have to go to the poorhouse. I had nothing to say to these words. They were not new to me. My very first recollections of existence included hints of the same kind. This reproach of my dependence had become a vague sing-song in my ear, very painful and crashing, but only half intelligible. Miss Abbott joined it. And you ought not to think yourself on an equality with the Mrs. Reed and Master Reed, because Mrs. kindly allows you to be brought up with them. They will have a great deal of money, and you will have none. It is your place to be humble, and to try to make yourself agreeable to them.
The family of Dashwood had long been settled in Sussex. Their estate was large, and their residence was at Norland Park, in the centre of their property, where, for many generations, they had lived in so respectable a manner as to engage the general good opinion of their surrounding acquaintance. The late owner of this estate was a single man, who lived to a very advanced age, and who, for many years of his life, had a constant companion and housekeeper in his sister. But her death, which happened 10 years before his own, produced a great irritation in his home, for to supply her loot, he invited and received into his house the family of his nephew, Mr. Henry Dashwood, the legal inheritor of the Norland estate, and the person to whom he intended to bequeath it. In the society of his nephew and niece and their children, the old gentleman's days were comfortably spent. His attachment to them all increased. The constant attention of Mr. and Mrs. Henry Dashwood to his wishes, which proceeded not merely from interest, but from gladness of heart, gave him every degree of solid comfort which his age could receive, and the carefulness of the children aided a relish to his existence. By his own marriage, likewise, which happened soon afterwards, he added to his wealth. To him, therefore, the succession to the Norland estate was not so really important as to his sisters, for their fortune, independent of what might arise to them for their fathers inheriting that property, could be but small. Their mother had nothing, and their father only £7,000 on his own disposal, for the remaining moiety of his first wife's fortune was also secured to her child, and he had only a life interest in it. The old gentleman died. His will was read, and like almost every other will, gave as much disappointment as pleasure. He was neither so unjust nor so ungrateful as to leave his estate from his nephew, but he left it to him on such terms as destroyed half the value of the bequest. Mr. Dashwood had wished for it more for the sake of his wife and daughters than for himself or his son, but to his son and his son's son, a child of 4 years old, it was secured in such a way as to leave to himself no power of providing for those who were most dear to him, and who most needed a provision by any charge on the estate, or by any sale of its valuable goods. Of all the attention which, for years, he had received from his niece and her daughters, he meant not to be unkind. However, and as a mark of his affection for the 3 girls, he left them £1,000 apiece.
Coming from the country, you might like a little fruit. Strawberries. Strawberry jam. Have you seen your luggings? It is by no means splendid, but I'm sure we shan't come to blows. Put them up! Put them up! Come on! Is he mad perhaps? I beg your pardon? Stand your ground. Regular Ulfatai. The trolling boy. The pale young gentleman. there with my Aunt Sarah on the trial visit. Miss Havisham fancied that she wanted to see me play. She clearly didn't take a fancy to me, or at least on purpose, but just as well, because otherwise I might have been what would call it hysterical, affianced, betrothed, engaged. But it was not to be.
I'm extremely sorry.
Sorry, the girl's a tartar, hard and haughty and capricious, to the last degree brought up by Miss Havisham to wreak revenge on older male sex.
Why should she wreak revenge?
Lord, Mr. Pitt, don't you know? Please, tell me. Miss Havisham was very rich and very proud, a spoiled child. Her mother died when she was young and her father married again. His cook, would you believe? And they had a child, Arthur, who was, how might I put this, not entirely legitimate and consequently nursed at very young. At this point I might break off and mention that in London it is not the custom to put a knife into the mouth for fear of accident. Also, the spoon is not generally the proper end but animal. Do you mind?
Not at all. I'm grateful.
Now, Miss Havisham met a certain young man who she loved devotedly, passionately, idolized, and soon they were engaged. He persuaded her to buy her half-brothers sharing the brewery at an immense price, so when he was her husband he could manage it all. Soon the happy day arrived, the wedding dresses were bought, the wedding tour planned out, a great feast laid out. The wedding guests were invited, my parents among them. The groom wrote her a letter, she received the letter,
and she was dressing for marriage
at 20 minutes to 9. It was a conspiracy by the groom and her brother to defraud Miss Havisham and break her heart. And that illusion we succeeded. Let's step out, get some fresh air, shall we?
Good. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, gato.
Do you know, General, what the wicked do after death?
Go ahead.
What is it?
A peaceful fire.
Should you like to fall into the pit of murder forever?
No, sir.
What must you do to avoid it?
You must keep in good health and not die.
What's her problem?
She's an orphan. Her mother was my husband's sister. On his death, he exhorted me to care for her. I have always treated her with one account only. And if she accepted it, love is where she said it was true time with her. She has a heart of stone and so entertaining that her worst fault is that of deceit. Jane Eyre is a liar.
You can rest assured, dear lady, that to mortify our both in the sentiments of vanity and pride, we are taught to be born immortals. We shall root out the wickedness in this small and faithful plant.
And as for her vocation, you must spend them all in glory.
Child of God, I shall leave you with this. It is fair, especially the son and death of the girl addicted to falsehood. Janelle, be able to meet your charge.
You said I was a liar. I'm not a liar. If I were, I said that I loved you, and I don't. It is like the worst of anybody in the world, except your son, John Reed. It is he who should read this, for he is the liar, not I.
How dare you?
I'll never call you aunt again as long as I live. And if anyone asks how I liked you, I'll say you treated me with miserable cruelty.
I have cared for you since infancy.
I'll remember how you thrust me back into the red room, to my dying day, even when you know it was haunted and I begged to be let out. People think you are good, but you're bad and hard-hearted. I let everyone know what you have done.
Children must be corrected for their faults.
Deceit is not my fault.
But you are passionate.
You think I can do without one bit of love or kindness, but I cannot be so. My Uncle Reed is in heaven and can see all that you do and think. He knows that you hate me and wish me dead. He can see how you hate me.
Good. Yeah.
then I am at death's door.
It's a miracle that life is extended this far. Did you not hear him complaining of his rheumatism in his shoulder? A slight ache, I believe, was his phrase. But Edward said he would bring it himself.
Dear Mrs. Dashwood, Miss Dashwood, Miss Marian, and Captain Margaret, it gives me great pleasure to restore the Sadler's to its rightful owner, alas. Business in London does not permit me to accompany it, although it is likely to hurt me more than it hurts you. For the present, my memories of your kindness must be enough to sustain me, and I remain your devoted servant, always A.C. Ferris.
Why hasn't he come? He says he's busy, dear. He said he would come. Why hasn't he come?
I'm taking you for a walk.
I came for a walk.
You need another.
No, it's going to rain.
It's not going to rain.
You always said that, and then it always starts.
I fear Mrs. Jennings is a bad influence. You must listen, Elinor.
We're not engaged, Mama.
But he loves you, dearest. Of that I'm certain.
I am by no means assured of his regards for me. But even if we were to feel such a preference, I think we should be foolish to assume there wouldn't be many obstacles to his marrying a one of no rank who cannot afford to buy sugar.
But your heart must tell you.
In such a situation, Mama, it is perhaps better to use one's head.
You ought to be married.
Indeed, I see Mrs. Fairfax has intimated my intention to put my neck into the sacred noose.
Adele should go to school and I might seek another situation. Congratulations, sir.
Thornfield is a pleasant place in summer, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
You'll be sorry to part with it. It's always the way with events in life. No sooner have we got settled than a voice cries, rise and move on. I'll find you a new situation, Jane, one I hope you'll accept.
I shall be ready when your mother to march comes.
Must I really lose a faithful paid subordinate such as yourself?
You must.
We've been good friends, haven't we?
Yes, sir.
I have a strange feeling with regard to you, as if I had a string somewhere under my left ribs, tightly knotted to a similar string in you, and if you were to leave, I'm afraid that cord of communion would snap, and then I've a notion that I'd take to bleeding inwardly. As for you, you'd forget me.
How? I've lived a full life here. I have known happiness. I've talked face to face with what I reverence and delight in, an original expanded mind. I have known you, Mr. Rochester.
Then why must you leave?
Because of your wife.
Jane, you must stay.
And become nothing to you? Am I a machine without feelings? Do you think that because I am poor, obscure, plain and little, that I am soulless and heartless? I have as much soul as you, and full as much heart. And if God had blessed me with beauty and wealth, I can make it as hard for you to leave me as it is for I to leave you. I'm not speaking to you to mortal flesh. It's my spirit that addresses your spirit as if we passed to the grave and stood at God's feet equal, as we are.
As we are. Don't struggle.
I am a free human being with an independent will, which I now exert to leave you.
Then let your will decide your destiny. I offer you my hand, my heart, and a share of all this. I ask you to pass through life at my side. Jane, you are my equal and my likeness. Will you marry me?
Are you mocking me?
Do you doubt me?
Entirely. Your bride is Miss Ingram.
Miss Ingram, she's the machine without feelings. It's you, you rare and reality thing, poor and obscure as you are. Please accept me as your husband.
You love me?
I do.
Then, sir, I will marry you.
You are to be married.
I see. Mrs. Fairfax has intimated my intention to put my neck into the sacred noose.
Adele should go to school, and I must seek another situation. Congratulations, sir.
Thornfield is a pleasant place in summer, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
It will be quite difficult to part with it. It's always that way with events in life. No sooner have we got settled than a voice cries, rise and move on. I shall find you in a situation, Jane, one I hope that you'll accept.
I shall be ready when your order to march comes.
Must I really lose a faithful, paid subordinate such as yourself?
You must.
We've been good friends, haven't we?
Yes, sir.
I have a strange feeling with regard to you, as if I had a string somewhere under my left ribs, tightly knotted to a similar string in you. And if you were to leave, I believe that cord of communion would snap. And then I have a notion I take to bleeding inwardly. As for you, you'd forget me.
How? I have lived a full life here. I have known happiness. I've talked face to face with what I reverenced and delighted, an original, expanded mind. I have known you, Mr. Rochester.
Then why must you leave?
Because of your wife.
Jane, you must stay.
And become nothing to you. Am I a machine without feelings? Do you think that because I am poor, plain, and little, I am soulless and heartless? I have as much soul as you and full as much heart. And if God had blessed me with beauty and wealth, I can make it as hard for you to leave me as it is for I to leave you. I'm not speaking to you as a mortal flesh. It is my spirit that addresses your spirit, as if it passed through the grave and stood at God's feet equal as we are.
As we are. Don't struggle.
I am a free human being with an independent will, which I now exert to leave you.
Then let your will decide your destiny. I offer you my hand, my heart, and a share of all this. I ask you to pass through life at my side. Jane, you are my equal and my likeness. Will you marry me?
Are you mocking me?
Do you doubt me?
Entirely. Your bride is Miss Ingram.
Miss Ingram, she is the machine without feelings. It is you rare, unearthly thing, poor and obscure as you are. Please accept me as your husband. I must have you for my own.
You wish me to be your wife?
I swear it.
You love me?
I do.
Then, sir, I will marry you.
How beautiful is your shape. When Mr. Rochester's visits are always satisfying. He doesn't like to arrive and find everything else wrong. So I keep it on her ready. Now, my name is Red. Did I mention she's French? Sophie a pleuré car personne ne la comprenait. Adèle, s'il te plaît. Personne n'est venu parler sur Monsieur Rochester, mais il est parti. Will you ask her about her parents? Mr. Rochester has neglected to tell me everything about her. Au buffet, toi, de la part de venir à toi. Avec maman, mais elle est partie avec le sangliage maintenant. Maman apprenait à danser, à réciter des poèmes, et me laissait toujours m'asseoir sur le genou des gens qui venaient lui rendre visite. Puis je récitais pour vous, mademoiselle. Ce serait ravissant. Adèle d'autres choix serait Havisham. Comment les filles, et le bonnet, le moyen, oh mon Dieu, je l'ignore. Je veux ici l'oublier. Oui, je le veux, et je le vois encore. Oh, really? French.
You are to be married.
Indeed, I see Mr. Fairfax as it is my intention to put my neck into the sacred noose.
Adele should go to school, and I must seek another situation. Congratulations.
Thorfinn is a pleasant place in South, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
You'll be sorry to part with it. It's always the way it events in life. No sooner have you got settled than a voice cries, rise and move on. I'll find you a new situation, Jane, one I will get to accept.
I shall be ready when your order to march comes.
Must I really lose a faithful paid subordinate such as yourself?
You must.
We've been good friends, haven't we?
Yes, sir.
I have a strange feeling with regard to you, as if I had a string somewhere under my left ribs, tightly knotted to a similar string in you. And if you were to leave, I'm afraid that cord of communion will snap. And then I've a notion that I take to bleeding inwardly. As for you, it's forgetting.
How? I lived a full life here. I have known happiness. I've talked face to face with what I reverence and delight in, an original, expanding mind. I have known you, Mr. Rochester.
Then why must you leave?
Because of your wife.
Jane, you must stay.
And become nothing to you? Am I a machine without feelings? Do you think that because I'm poor, obscure, plain and little, that I'm soulless and heartless? I have as much soul as you and full as much heart. And if God had blessed me with beauty and wealth, I could make it as hard for you to leave me as it is for I to leave you. I'm not speaking to you from mortal flesh. It's my spirit that addresses your spirit, as if we passed to the grave and stood at God's feet, equal as we are.
As we are. Don't struggle.
I'm a free human being with an independent will, which I now exert to leave you.
Then let your will decide your destiny. I offer you my hand, my heart, and a share of all this. I ask you to pass your life at my side, Jane. You are my equal and my likeness. Will you marry me?
Are you mocking me?
Do you doubt me?
Entirely. Your bride is Miss Ingram.
Miss Ingram, she is the machine without feelings. It's you, you rare and unearthly thing. Poor and obscure as you are, please accept me as your husband. I must have you for my own.
You wish me to be your wife?
I surely do.
Do you love me?
Yes, I do.
Yes, sir, I will marry you.
Gibt es in
Oh, my dearest, what a commotion! Mr. Edward Ferris, the very one I used to joke you about, Miss Dashwood, is engaged these 5 years to Lucy Steele. Oh, Mr. Ferris, his mother, who by all accounts is very proud, has demanded he break the engagement on pain of disinheritance. But he has refused to break his promise to Lucy. He has stood by her, good man, and is cut off without a penny. She has settled it all irrevocably on Mr. Robert. But I cannot stop. I must go to Lucy. Your sister-in-law drove her to hysteria. How long have you known?
Since the night Mrs. Jennings took us along.
Why did she not tell me?
Lucy told me in the strictest confidence. I cannot remember.
I cannot marry her.
Did you have him treat her even worse than you did treat you?
No, but not where I have him married, if there is no love.
He promised her a long time ago, long before he met you. He may have some regret, but he will be happy in the knowledge that he did his duty and did his work. After all, it is bewitching, the idea of one's happiness entirely depending on one person. It is not always possible we must accept. Edward was very lucid, and then I broke off.
Always resignation and acceptance. Always prudence in honor and beauty. Elinor, where is your heart?
What do you know of my heart? What do you want anything but your own suffering? For weeks, Marianne, I have had this pressing on me, without being allowed to speak with a single creature. It was forced on me by the person whose prior claims to read all my hopes. I endured her exaltation knowing I was divided from her forever. If not bound to silence, believe me, Marianne, I could have produced proof of broken heart, even for you. I did not. I thought you were not fond of children, Mr. Rochester.
Nor am I, Lady Ingram.
What induced you to take charge of her?
She was left on my hands.
Why don't you send her to school?
She has a governess.
Poor child, I had about half a dozen in my day, all testable in Cuba.
It's true. Oh, Mr. Rochester, beware the governess.
Mama thinks they're general hysterics.
Or degenerates. I thank heaven I have done with them.
It's a miracle I survived my education. I remember Miss Wilson screaming, "You villainous child."
That's right. She tried to set her hair on fire. Frequently, I might add.
Anyway, enough of this dreary race. We should have music and a new subject. Signor Eduardo, what should it be?
I give you beauty.
There's nothing new to be said. I give you back male beauty. Well, that's my son.
Here, here.
A man should pay no heed to his looks. He should possess only strength and valor. Gentlemen are highwaymen. His beauty lies in his power.
Then a pirate will do for you?
Especially the sudden death of the girl addicted to falsehood. Jane Eyre, be ready to meet your judge.
Go out of the room. Return to the nursery.
You said I was a liar. I'm not a liar. If I were, I should say that I love you, and I don't. I dislike you worse than anybody in the world except your son, John Reed. It is he who should read this. For he is the liar, not I.
How dare you?
I'll never call you aunt again as long as I live, and if anyone asks me how I liked you, I'll say you treated me with miserable cruelty.
I have cared for you since infancy.
I remember when you thrust me back into the red room to my dying day, even when you knew it was haunted and I begged to be let out. People think you're good, but you're bad and hard-hearted. I let everyone know what you have done.
Children must be corrected for their faults.
This it is not my fault.
You are passionate.
You think I can do without one bit of love or kindness, but I cannot live so. My uncle Reed is in heaven and can see everything that you do and think. So can my mother and father. They see how you hate me and wish me dead. They can see. They see everything you do and they will judge you, Mrs. Reed.
She was left on my Elinor.
What did you take a charge of her?
She had a government.
Why don't you send her to school? I thought you were not fond of children, Mr. Rochester.
Nor am I, Lady Ingram.
What did you take charge of her?
She was left on my hands.
Why don't you send her to school?
She has a governess.
Poor child, I have about half a dozen on my bed. All detestable women.
That's true.
Mr. Rochester, beware the governess. One thinks they're generally hysterics. Or degenerates. I think what I have done in my It's a miracle I survived the education. I remember Miss Wilson screaming, "You villainous child!"
She tried leaving her hair on fire. Frequently, I met her.
Anyway, enough of this dreary race. We shall have music and a new subject. Signor Eduardo, what shall it be?
I give you beauty.
There's nothing new to be said. I give you back melody. Well, that's my son.
Here.
A man should pay no heed to his looks. He should possess only strength and valor. Gentlemen or highwaymen, his beauty lies in his heart.
Then the pilot will be told.
Monsieur, this is Mademoiselle.
Let her sit. I have taken great pains with her. Upright, not balanced, yet in short time she's improved.
Thank you, Mr. Rochester.
You've been resident here for 3 months?
Yes, sir.
And for months decaying. What's your tale of woe?
Pardon?
All governesses have a tale of woe. What's yours?
I was brought up on my own. Mrs. Wood have been sent in house confinement than this. I did not think it over school, but I received as good an education as I could hope for. I have no tale of woe, sir.
Where are your parents?
Dead.
Do you remember them?
No.
And why are you not with Mrs. Reed of Gateshead now?
She cast me off, sir.
Why?
Because I was born and said she disliked me.
How long is your writer?
8 years.
No tale of woe.
I really thank Providence for sending us this year.
Don't trouble yourself to give her a character. I will judge for myself. I have to thank her for this friend. You bleached my horse.
I did not.
We were waiting for the people down the lane.
I have no paper, sir.
I mean, to the inns, elf, and the little green man.
The sad truth is they are gone. They have several country for some other country where the rulers are sages and the populations come.
You lie, I brought one of your rings. Oh, where to get your copies? Adele brought me these. Are they yours?
Yes, sir.
Where to get your copies?
At my head.
They have head and I see on your shoulders.
Yes, sir.
And who's this?
The evening star.
You are happy when you painted this?
Yes, the paint is one of the keenest pleasures I have ever known.
Then your pleasures, how do you feel? Are you satisfied with them?
Far from it. I imagine things I'm powerless to execute.
Not quite. You secure the shoulder of your thoughts. Yet, the drawings are for a scholar peculiar. Good night.
Come on, then.
fellow. I hope his name is his horse.
Colonel Brandon is the most eligible bachelor in the county.
Oh, yes, indeed.
He is bound to go for honor. He's a decorated from Miss Dashwood. Her agency she's never had to be necessities. I've seen the Miss Marian. I think I have nothing to see.
You sniffed on that already, mother. I was on my point of force it.
What sort of name is he, Miss Dashwood? Butcher, baker, candlestick maker? I think they out of you, you know?
She's horribly good at winking.
You're in a lonely country now, Miss Dashwood. You can't ask any citizen.
Or if we go, we do not keep them long.
He's coming from the parish, Evans.
Or perhaps handsome lieutenant.
Give us a clue, Miss Dashwood. He's in uniform.
He's no profession.
No profession? He's a gentleman?
No perfectly well, there's no such person. There is, and his name begins with an F.
An F? Indeed. Now there is a promising letter.
Foster,
Oh, there is one.
Forest, Fathering, Featherty,
Oh, yes, Fortescue.
Fonda.
Sir John, may I play a pianoforte?
Yes, of course, yes. We do not stand on ceremony here, my dear.
Please forgive. An entertainment. I declare I cannot remember the last time we had a song in the house.
Brandon, come, it's you beautiful neighbor.
What a pity, late Colonel. You have not had our delightful songbird, Miss Marian.
A great pity indeed.
Miss Marian, may I present you my dear friend Colonel Brandon. We served in the East Indies together. I assure you he is no better fellow in the world.
Have you really been to the East Indies, Colonel?
I have.
What is it like?
Like what?
It is full of spices.
Now, Miss Marian, it's your turn to entertain us.
Oh no, Sir John,
And I believe that he will sing in F major.
Yes, sir.
You show no fear.
I was afraid of the Interlude.
There is no danger.
Mr. Rochester, who did that violence?
I cannot tell you.
But why do you protect them?
I make life, capital L. Its consequence plus my existence. For years, I tried to escape it. This spring, I came home, not so, and so weakened. And I met a gentle stranger who society revives me. With her, I feel like I live again in a higher, purer way. Tell me, My justified number leaping is an obstacle of custom to attain her.
There is an obstacle.
Yes.
But what can it be? If you cherish an affection, sir, then fortune alone cannot impede you.
Yes.
And if the lady is of a noble stock, and hence she may reciprocate.
Jane, of whom do you think I speak?
Of Miss Ingram.
I must think what Jane Eyre would do to secure my happiness.
I will do anything for you, sir. Anything that was right.
It does fit me quite. I feel I can speak to you now of my lovely one. You've met her and you know her. She's a rare one, isn't she? Fresh and healthy, without solar trained. I'm sure she will regenerate me with a vengeance.
Pete, we never take warning.
How can you do it?
What?
Give your affections to that man.
Our sort of ugliness just hover about the lighted candle. Can the candle help them?
No, but you can.
Perhaps, if I can.
But you must care to encourage a man as despised, as adult-headed and unworthy and polished as Bench Drummer, a man who has nothing to recommend him except money.
Oh, Pete, knowing the fate is so.
I am happy to give that man the looks and smiles you never give to me.
Do you want me to deceive you?
You will deceive him?
Yes, him and many, many other men. I deceive all of them but you.
Then why am I to be spared?
Oh, Pete, why do you think so?
Lovely, isn't it? Moscow Americans understand. Stella, Mr. Drummer requires your presence. Urgently. You should hurry home, please.
I thought I was late to leave.
Dangerous to presume anything here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where can Brandon be? Poor fellow. I hope he's not late his horse.
Colonel Brandon is the most eligible bachelor in the county. He's bound to go for one of you. He's a better age for Miss Dashwood, but I dare say she's not to hide behind your Sussex. I see you, Miss Marianne. I think I've learned the secret.
Oh yes, indeed.
What sort of man is he, Miss Dashwood? Butcher, baker, candlestick maker? I'll winkle it out of you, you know.
You sniffed on that already, mother. You are worse than a counter, Fossey.
We've none of us any secrets here, Miss Dashwood.
She's hardly good at winkling.
Just a clue. Is he in uniform?
He's not professional.
No profession? He's a gentleman?
Margaret, you know perfectly well there is no such person. There is, and his name begins with an F. Margaret.
A nep? Indeed. There's a promising letter. Let me...
Foster?
There is one, yes.
Forrest, Fotheringay, Featherly.
Oh yes, Fortescue.
Sir John, may I bring up the answer?
Oh yes, of course. My goodness, yes. We do not stand on ceremony here, my dear.
Please forgive.
My name is Disturbance. I declare I can help you now. That's very sorry in the house.
Brendan, come. Come and meet our beautiful new neighbors.
What a pity you're late, Colonel. You have not already left for somewhere, Miss Marianne.
A great pity indeed. Mrs. Dashwood, may I present my dear friend, Colonel Brendan. We served in the East Indies together. I assure you there is not a better fellow in the world.
Have you ever been to the East Indies, Colonel?
I have.
What is it like?
Like? Haha. The air is full of spices. Now, Miss Dashwood, it's your turn to entertain us.
Oh no, Sir John,
And I believe I know what key you sing in F major.
Actually, please to offer you Colonel Barton Cottage as soon as ever you have it. Oh, it's my cousin, Sir John Miller. If I really know to prove the rent, has your man not yet seen this? No, I'll fetch her. Wait, no, it doesn't. Hi. I think. I believe that Edward and Elinor have formed an attachment. It would be cruel to let her miss so soon. Devotion is so far. Why so great? Do you disapprove of her choice? By no means, Edward is very amiable. Amiable? But there is something wanting. He's just a date. He's reading last night. Elinor has not a fears. His result suits her. Can you love her? Can the soul really be satisfied with such polite affections? The love is to burn, to be on fire, like Juliet, Queen of it, Eloise. Let me look at three hands, dear. Pathetic, to die for love? How can you see so? It could be more glorious. I think you may be taking the romantic to see this a little bit. Is love a fancy or a feeling? No, it is immortal as immaculate true. It is not a blossom shed as soon as you. Those from one stem of life will it go, in barren regions where no waters flow. Not real promise, she's the face of me. What a pity is that Taylor has no passion for reading. People do ask him to read, then it makes you nervous. Me? Yes, but since your behavior to think in all other respects is perfectly cordial, I must assume that you like him in spite of his deficiencies. I think him everything as amiable and worthy. Praise, indeed. But he shall have my broken devotion when it's him he has to be my brother. What shall I do without him? Without me? I'm sure you'll be very happy, but you must promise not to live far away. Marianne, there is no question of that leave. But there is no understanding. Do you love him? I do not attempt to deny that I think very highly of him. That I greatly esteem him. Like him. Use these insipid words again and I shall leave alone this instant. Very well, forgive me. I believe my feelings to be stronger than I have said, but further than that you must not believe. Is love a fancy or a feeling? Or a Ferris? Go away! I do not deny that I think very highly of him, that I greatly esteem him, that I like him. Would you please stop?
Where can Brandon be? Poor fellow. I hope he's not lame his horse.
Colonel Brennan is the most eligible best.
Oh, yes, indeed.
He's bound to go for one of you. He's a better age for Miss Dashwood. But I dare say she left her heart behind in Sussex. I see you, Miss Marian. I think I found out the secret.
You see from that already, mother. Here was my point of fussing.
What sort of man is he, Miss Dashwood? Butcher, baker, candlestick maker? I never really thought of you, you know.
She's horribly good at winking.
We're in lonely country now, Miss Dashwood, with none of us any secrets here.
Or if you do, we do not keep them, no.
He's curate of the parish, I dare say.
Or perhaps a handsome lieutenant.
You must have known Miss Dashwood. Is he in uniform?
He's no profession.
Oh!
No profession? He's a gentleman?
Margaret, you know perfectly well there is no such person.
There is, and his name begins with an F. Margaret.
But F indeed. Now, there's the promising letter. Let me... F.
Forest.
There's one, yes.
Featherton.
Oh, yes. Fortescue?
Fondant.
Sergio, might I play your piano forte?
Yes, of course. My goodness, yes. We do not spend on ceremony here, my dear.
Please forgive. On entertainment, I cannot remember when you last heard the song in the house.
Come and meet our beautiful new neighbors.
What a pity you left Colin, I cannot remember. What a pity you left Colin. You have not heard our delightful songbird, Miss Mary.
A great pity, indeed. Mrs. Dashwood, may I present my dear friend Colonel Brandon. We serve in the East Indies together. I'm sure there's not a better fellow in the world.
Have you really been to the East Indies, Colonel?
I have.
What is it like?
Like? Hot?
The air is full of spices.
Now, Miss Dashwood, it's your turn to entertain us.
Oh, Sir John.
And I believe I know what key you will sing in. F major.
Fashion consists of the various fashions and trends in British culture that emerged and developed in the United Kingdom and the British Empire throughout the Victorian era, roughly from the 1813s through the 1890s. Clothes were seen as an expression of women's place in society. Upper-class women who did not need to work often wore a tightly laced corset over their bodies and paired them with a skirt. Middle-class women exhibit similar dress styles. However, the decorations were not as extravagant.
We combined the Victorian and Regency era, creating more types of outfit. First, a ball gown with a shawl showing a sophisticated look for an important event. The second dress presents a girl entering society with wide meaning, innocence, and purity. The third dress shows a comfortable outfit for indoors for reading a book and spending time with family. The last one is the perfect image of a countryside with a summery hat and a flowy, beautiful dress to run in the fields.
As you can see, we are sitting in a Victorian tea room. So, let me present the saloon. On the table, we have a beautiful bouquet of wild flowers that represent the era very well, and a very Victorian table-like setting. On the right, we have a gorgeous piano. On top of it, we have a calligraphy pen and a vintage notebook. Nearby the grand piano, we have a cupboard filled with china and lots of classical books.
For the upper-class Victorians, the tea party was a very important time of the day, mainly for socializing and communication. Setting the table is vital. The Victorians are very known for hospitality and really showing off their wealth. When one hosts this kind of party, it includes sweet treats like cookies, as we have here, cakes, as well as sandwiches. So now let us really enjoy our tea party.
Victorian fashion. Living in the Victorian era was exciting because of all the new inventions and paths of change and progress, but it was a hard time to live in if you didn't have much money, almost as nowadays. Plus, simple fact that the Victorians started the Christmas traditions like sending cards and decorating trees that we know and enjoy today is very pleasant. There was a rule for everything in Victorian times, even about the sorts of clothes you'd wear in the morning or evening and when in the city or in the country. Stylish and elegant, more hairstyles for women were simple and symmetrical. Long hair was parted in the center and looped over ears and sides, pulled back into a bun at the center crown. In the evening, lace, flowers, headbands perched on the head with a flat top and large sides. Ringlet curls could also be worn on the sides. Wealthy people could also afford to buy beautiful clothes. All women in the Victorian times wore dresses with long skirts. They wore dresses that needed hoop skirts underneath to make the dresses spread out in a dome shape around their legs. Or they wore skirts that lay mostly flat but that puffed out a bit around their bottom. This was called bustle. All men, whether rich or poor, wore waistcoat. Rich men also wore top hats, carried walking sticks. By the end of the era, a simple silhouette was making waves, leading the next Edwardian generation to new freedoms in life and fashion. Victorian furniture was characterized by ornate carvings, dark woods, and heavy luxurious fabrics. The teacup and saucer set for the afternoon tea were beautifully adorned with classic gold metallic scroll pattern and roses of pink and red colors.
The Victorian style was named, as its name suggests, after Queen Victoria of England. It is defined by strong color, luxury, and brilliance. The Industrial Revolution of that period made
all of this accessible to low income.
The Victorian style of clothing emerged during a period of increasing welfare in England. People were attracted to beauty, including clothes. This is the Victorian style clothing model. The corset was worn a lot at that time. Long skirts so. This is the Victorian style table. Everything is made to look as real as possible. In the past, people used to meet mostly for tea. The Victorian style furniture is massive and made of dark wood. One model of furniture is this sofa. In the past, especially in England, these sofas were found in many people's homes. This painting is from the Victorian style collection. He has many years behind him.